everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan and today we are continuing with our how to build a GM 5.3 liter V8. I also want to mention that this build is sponsored by Summit Racing. No, they're not sending me any money, but they are going to be sending me some really cool parts as soon as we get back from the machine shop. So make sure you buy all your speed parts from summitracing.com. Basically today is going to be removing the rotating assembly and getting it prepped and ready for the machine shop, and I'm also going to go over what you say to the machine shop when you get there. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, the next thing we can do is go around the oil pan and remove all the 10mm bolts. Now these at the back are a little different. Check that out, they're a bit longer, so make sure you remember that when you're putting it back together. All right, so with all the bolts out of the way, we can go ahead and grab a flathead screwdriver, find a little open gap for us, and try to jimmy this pan off. There she goes. There's one side. Try the other now. There we go. She's free. And what you want to do is just lift the pan straight up. Don't try to go side to side. Just like that, because you want to avoid the oil pickup. So I wanted to position the camera so you can see deep down into the pan, and I'm gonna try to get some of this stuff up on my finger there. Now there's a bunch of crud down in here, take my word for it. This is chunky and gross. There's basically a little dirt and particulates and little pieces of metal get stuck down in here, and this is why you change your oil, because if this plugs up your oil screen, you can have low pressure or no oil pressure really, and that causes premature wear, oil lifter ticking, all kinds of different things. So this is why you change your oil. All right, we're gonna remove our oil pickup here. It's a 10mm bolt here on the left. There we go, set that aside. And then it's also held in with two other 13mm bolts. All right, we should be able to remove our oil pickup. Might fight you a little bit because there's a little O-ring at the end of the pickup. Let me set that aside. Now we can remove the rest of the nuts that hold the windage tray on. Those are also 13mm. So what a windage tray does is it keeps oil away from the crankshaft, and it also captures oil with these vents that's whipping around with the crank. Now we can go ahead and remove that windage tray. There we are, exposing our rotating assembly. Now we can remove the bolts that hold the timing cover on. They're 10mm, and when we're removing the timing cover, the oil pump is actually on the front of the snout for the crank, so it's all going to come together. Alright, now we can remove the front cover here, and I was wrong, the oil pump doesn't come with it, so you can just use a screwdriver and remove the front timing cover along with the front seal. So we can go ahead and remove our timing cover seal here, and just go ahead and throw that right in the garbage can. And the 4 bolts that hold the oil pump on are 10mm. Go ahead and remove those. Now don't worry about it just falling off, because it's sitting on the end of the crankshaft. It can't. You have to actually wiggle it off. We can go ahead and, you know, we're gonna definitely replace this unit, but if you want to reuse it, just make sure it's in good shape. Honestly, I would just replace it. You're already here, and oil is very important to the engine. All right, before I remove the timing set, I want to go ahead and point out how worn out this one is. Look how much play there is. You can actually nearly make it jump a tooth, which is not good. And if it's nice and slacked like this one is, it can actually make the camshaft become retarded. You have retarded camshaft timing, which will retard engine performance, and it's just all around a bad thing. So if yours is loose like this, do not reuse it. Throw it right in the trash and buy a new one. So the big cog is held on with 3 10mm. We can go ahead and remove those. So with those bolts removed, we can walk this off the front of our camshaft. This will give us enough to get the chain off the gear for the crank, and like I said, this is going right in the trash. So this is our oil drive and crankshaft drive gear for our timing stuff. Now you're going to need to replace this. You can either do it yourself with a 3-jaw puller like we showed earlier, or you can have a machine shop handle it. We're going to let the machine shop take care of that, since they're doing the machine work on the crankshaft anyway. Alright, so now we can take the rear plate off. That is a part of our one-piece rear main seal. They're all 10mm bolts. They're a little tricky to get to on the stand here, but just go slow and take your time, and it'll be done in no time. With all the bolts removed, we can go ahead and grab a large standard screwdriver and just gently massage that rear plate off. Just like that. remove it just like that. All right, so what I've done is affixed some of those end of the crankshaft bolts that hold the flex plate on that we removed earlier into the back of the crank again, because they're very strong and these are their natural home anyway. And what we're gonna use is a very long prying implement. I have this really nice pry bar made by Snap-on. And what you can do is use that in an orientation like this to rotate your engine, you know, little bit and by bit at a time. And what that's gonna do is position the end of the connecting rods in such a way that you can remove them. So like showing you earlier, we're gonna use our big pry bar here, and that's gonna turn our rotating assembly over, so that way we can have access to the #1 piston. What I want to talk about next is numbering your connecting rods. A lot of people like to number these by stamping a 1 or something into the sides of both pieces here. That way you ensure that every connecting rod piece goes back to its own home. Here's my honest opinion about that. As long as you organize them on left and right, you're good to go. You don't need to number them. That's my personal opinion. But if you want to number them and put them back exactly correct, good on you. We can go ahead and grab an 11mm socket and remove these bolts here. And they're in pretty snug, so give them some love. Make sure it's firmly square on the head too. There we go. Just like that, loosen those up. So what I like to do is loosen these a bit before we hit the back of the piston. That way we get a little bit of gap here, nothing, you know, falls out on us unexpectedly. All right, so what I'm gonna be doing is grabbing a very long standard screwdriver, very big one, and we're gonna put it just on the back of the piston, just like that, while we strike the end of our big screwdriver. So what we're gonna do, you do not need to hit it really hard, do not hit it with the force of 1,000 suns, just start with some light taps. Look, it's already broken loose, and we can remove those bolts the rest of the way. So now we can back these bolts the rest of the way out. And we can set these aside in our left-hand pile, because the way I'm going to organize them is with the engine flipped over, so it's on my left, even though it's on the right side of the engine if it's flipped the correct way. Go ahead and take the cap off. Now, make sure you keep this cap with this rod, though. Don't mix any of these up. So I got a nice zoom in on this bearing. Check out all that wear. Ooh, that is pretty. What causes that is basically metal on metal contact or dirty oil. So lack of oil changes did not do this engine any favors just by looking at the bearings. So we're gonna grab our screwdriver like I showed you earlier and place that on the back of the #1 piston. And we're gonna give it a couple light taps with our hammer until it comes out the top of the engine. Keep giving it some taps. Once it gets close, you're gonna wanna catch it. There we go. So this is #1 out of the engine. We can go ahead and put that on our table and then put the cap back on it. Next thing we do is take out the crankshaft positioning sensor, 10mm bolt. We already have all the pistons out. Once this is removed, we can take our crankshaft out. We'll grab a screwdriver and remove that. There we go, we're just probably gonna get a new one of these. So this is what makes an LS kind of unique and pretty darn strong, is they have bolts on the side of the webbing of the block that holds the side of the block to the crankshaft journals. They're 10mm bolts, and we're gonna remove all of them before we start removing the main caps here. They're not held in super tight, but go ahead and put these in a special place just in case they're a particular grade or something. So make sure these go basically back in the place you removed them. So similarly to how we undid the head bolts, we're gonna go in a reverse spiral. So normally when we're putting things in, you wanna go in a spiral like this, but when you're taking it out, you just do the opposite. So just follow along and we'll be good to go. So the middle bolts are 13 for some reason, so the outers are 15, the inners are 13. All right, when we're removing our main journals here, mine are numbered, which is excellent. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If yours aren't numbered, number them. They have to go back in the way they came out. So what we're gonna do is take one of these bolts here and a plastic hammer and tap it lightly, side to side. And then we should be able to kind of wiggle her in and out. There we go. Just keep working her back and forth until you get that off, and then just do this for all 5 journals. Then we're ready to take the crank out. Another tip for you is if there isn't enough area to move the journal in and out, you can go ahead and rotate the crankshaft like I showed earlier to give you that access. All right, with all our main caps out of the way, we can go ahead and lift our crankshaft straight out. You can't lift it at an angle. It has to come out completely parallel with its home. Just like that. That's what she looks like. It's pretty heavy, so I'm gonna go ahead and set this bad boy down. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is remove these 5 bearings here, and any additional sensors you might have missed, go ahead and look over again for block heater or something. The machine shop just wants the metal and no bearings, so make sure you do that. And go ahead and remove our bearings here and throw these in the trash. You're gonna need new ones. All right, so the only thing left in here is our camshaft, and actually we have some roller lifters left in there too. We've just moved them enough out of the way so we can get the camshaft out, because we're gonna tap them from the backside because they're just so seized up in there. There's nothing we can really do. And we're gonna show you the best way how to remove this bad boy. The next thing we're gonna do is remove our camshaft thrust plate here. It's held in with 4 10mm bolts, and they just come out. Plate comes off fairly easily. It does have a gasket there because it transfers oil from one side of the engine to the other, so make note of that for the future. So the very best way to remove a camshaft is to support the rear of it, and it gives you, especially on this engine, you can use your fingers here and press, and you don't want this back end to just kind of flop around and do whatever it wants. You want to support that as it passes through the bearings. As you're supporting the cam here, what the support is doing is making sure you're not galling any of these surfaces. It's good practice for when we're going to install them, because these bearings are going to be replaced by the machine shop. So this camshaft is a billet camshaft. They're very pricey, so a lot of people like to reuse them. Something to think about. And there we go. So with an engine this abused and beaten, and oil changes not happening, varnish builds up in the lifter bore here, and then it becomes stuck. But what you have to do to remove it from this side is be very careful with it. You can't just put a screwdriver in there, because if you gall that bore, basically the engine's junk. There is no rebuilding that bore. So what we've done is taking a 3/8 4-inch extension, put it into a universal, and then grabbed, I think this is an 8-inch extension. And what that's gonna do is go down into that hole and angle for us so we can lightly tap it out without galling the sides. So go ahead and give it some taps. I can already feel it coming. And there we go. Easy as pie. Do that for any remaining lifters you have jammed in their homes. All right, this is what it looks like. The rotating assembly all apart and in its many pieces. And this group of parts is now ready for the machine shop. So we found another reason why you don't want to just put a used engine in whatever you buy. Here's what a healthy rod looks like. Pretty cool. Nice and straight up and down. These surfaces are parallel, but look at this one. Uh-oh. Bent. This rod is junk. Water got into the engine while it was running, and hydrolocked. You can't compress a liquid, so it went to the next weakest point, which is your rod. So this rod is junk. So be aware of that when you're taking it apart. So now we're gonna get prepped for the machine shop. Before we take it over there though, I wanna mention you wanna take out any kind of sensors or plastic pieces or bearings still inside of here, except for the camshaft bearings. Leave those in, they'll take care of those.
Any kind of plugs or plastic pieces, just go ahead and remove those, make it as easy for the machine shop as possible. And we're also going to put the main caps back in with no bearings in those as well. So now we can put our caps back in when we found them. And what's really cool about this LS is that they're numbered. It's pretty hard to see, but there's a 1 stamped in here, so we know it's number 1. And then for 1 through 4, the wings are swept backward, so toward the rear of the engine. We can go ahead and reinstall that. I'm gonna grab a plastic hammer and just give those some light taps. Back in its home, very cool. We're gonna go ahead and install all of those and then we can tighten the bolts down. So we're gonna grab number 2 here, put that in its home with its wings swept backward. And then number 3 is special because it has the thrust bearing slot in there. But again, the wings go backward, just like that. And number 4, same thing. Plastic hammer on this one. Very cool. And then number 5 is special because all the other ones went this way, so you'd think, oh, they're all the same. Wrong. Number 5 is the other way. The wings face forward. All right, and we're just gonna snug these 13 millimeters up, and then we're gonna do the 15s. Don't worry about order or torque spec because the machine shop's gonna handle that, so then they can run a line hone through here to make sure that all the holes are concentric and proper. And there you go. So on our 5.3 here we have 2 bolts, one at the front, one at the rear, with some washers here. On our chain, we also have a bolt going through our chain. That way, if the engine kind of goes sideways on us, it doesn't kind of just go zook right to the edge. That can be really dangerous, so don't do that. Make sure you got a nice little hoop arrangement here so it doesn't walk on you. And then we're just gonna put some tension on this. Once we've achieved a bit of tension like this, with the engine hoist, we can remove our bolts that hold the engine in the stand. Once we have basically all the weight on the engine crane here, the stand is actually a little bit in the air, and what we can do is use some leverage to get our retaining pin out, and then just pull the stand off. Just like that. So then we can remove our engine stand apparatus here using a 17 millimeter impact gun. And we're going to go ahead and support it while we remove the last bolt. And there we go. Now we're ready to load this bad boy in the back of my truck and take it to the machine shop. So now we're going to load our engine on a nice flat piece of pretty thick plywood here. And you might want a friend for this part too, because someone's going to need to hold it like this while it comes down. And then we're going to push this all the way to the front of the bed. So go ahead and work on that. Go ahead and lower this guy down. Make sure it's not on anything that's not wood. Then we can get our engine crane out of there. It's important to note too, if you had 2 pretty strong guys, they could probably pick this up and put it on here, but I'm by myself, so engine crane's my friend. And now we can push it to the front of the bed. And it glides pretty easily with the plywood. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is ratchet strap this bad boy in place. I have it fully against my truck bed there so it can't go anywhere if you slam on the brakes. Now we have to ratchet strap it in so it doesn't go anywhere if you gas it. So, go ahead. Put this, just run it under here, and ratchet strap it in place. And there we go. Some test tugs. It's not going anywhere. So with our block properly secured, we can go ahead and talk about everything else we want to go with it. And we can talk about the optional stuff first, like the oil, or grubby oil pan here. That can go because not only are we going to take the crank, the heads, and anything else we need rebuilt, we're also going to take things that necessarily don't need to be rebuilt, but hot tanked and cleaned so they look nice. You definitely need to include your pistons. Harmonic balancer, timing plate cover, windage tray. Now we're gonna see if we can reuse these aluminum cylinder heads. If we can, we're gonna have them rebuild it for us too. They'll tell us if they're reusable or not. And then our last heaviest piece is our crankshaft. Oh, make sure that doesn't go anywhere, make sure that's really safe. Because they're going to regrind this and hopefully we can reuse it and put it right back in. So what I've done is affix some wood around our crank. Just make sure your load is nice and secure so it doesn't go anywhere while in transit. Before I end the video, I want to go ahead and mention basically what you're going to tell the machine shop so you can kind of speak their language a little bit. You're going to say, what's this block going to clean up at? So they're going to tell you it's going to clean up at a certain diameter on the bores there. Typically it's like 30 thousandths, that's what we did our big block on. So 30 thousandths, 60 thousandths, even 100 thousandths. I don't know if you can go 100 thousandths on a small block like that, but you can on big blocks. So the machine shop's going to tell you that, and then also have them put in your camshaft bearings. You really don't want to deal with that. That's a pain in the neck. They're also going to tell you what bearings to get for your journals. They're also going to tell you how big of pistons to get. So make sure you say, you know, what's this block going to clean up at? Make sure they magnaflux it. That's where they charge the iron block with electricity and apply a magnetic field to it so they can see if there's any big cracks using this dust powder. You should Google it. It's really interesting how it works. But basically, they're checking it and pressure testing it and making sure that the thing doesn't have like a pinhole leak you can't really see with the human eye. So that's cool. Also have them hot tank any parts you want to because they have that equipment there and you'll get those grubby parts back that are going to look brand new right out of the hot tank. So that is something you want to ask as well. And then of course you want to go over the associated cost with that. But honestly, for the amount of work they're doing, the high precision work, it's worth every penny. I also put down below a tour of the machine shop we're using. It's called Superior Automotive in Placentia, California. They were super cool and let me take a whole nice video tour. They're exactly what you're looking for in a machine shop. Somewhere that's clean, somewhere that's organized, and someone that understands exactly what you want. You know, if you're building a street engine, if you're building a drag engine, something crazy, is it going to be NA? Is it going to be turbo? Do you need to tell them all this? And they're going to write that all down. They're not sponsoring this video or anything. They're just a really cool local shop that I wanted to highlight about how cool they were, especially to me, and letting me film in there, which was just really awesome. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you Summit for sponsoring this build. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future content coming very soon, and we'll see you next time.